Hello friends, welcome to Sorry What. My name is Jason, and today's story is quite short but deliciously satisfying. If you're new here, please give a like and subscribe. Every new subscriber really motivates me to bring more of these stories to you. Alright, now that's done, let us begin today's story. I don't know when my wife decided it was okay to cheat. Since the day we started dating, I had made it clear that where cheating was concerned, there would be no second chances or forgiveness. Cheating was an act of war, and as far as I was concerned, winning wasn't enough. I would not be satisfied until the world burned down in revenge. I had watched my parents cheat on each other as if it was a sport, and the only person who lost the game was me. I was just a reminder of their failed marriage, and neither of them wanted me. Thankfully or not, I was old enough to understand, and that unlocked an eternal hatred of cheaters. It also unlocked a hatred of marriage, but I digress. I was already wealthy when I met Catherine, not Kate, Katie, or even Catherine with a K. My upbringing was upper middle class, but money never interested me. I could never determine the difference between a £1,000 burger and a £10 one. My interests were simple growing up. A pub on Friday, maybe meeting a nice girl for the weekend, and football with the lads on Saturday. These simple interests led me to play the lottery. Never to win, but to have a ticket and join the what-if conversations that happened every Friday night. It was all fun and games until I won. I was only 22. £80 million. I wasn't rich, I was wealthy. I knew enough not to share the news. I knew how money could make or break relationships and didn't want anything to do with that. Almost immediately, I set up a complicated multinational trust. Being mixed with an English dad and a mum from Botswana, I initially picked 2 law firms from both countries, but in a moment of inspiration, I expanded the trustees to include law firms from tax-free and secretive nations, including the Cayman Islands, Liechtenstein and Malta. Under the trust, we established a series of companies that the trust owns. The idea at the time was that I would have no assets. I would be a beneficiary of the trust to that extent. I could enjoy its property assets, and would be paid a generous allowance to ensure they were maintained under the employment of the holding company. The trust would pay for any faults I found. There were 2 clauses that are now important. 1. I could not get married without a prenuptial agreement. 2. Any legal children of the beneficiary would be entitled to an equal share of the trust with their siblings up to 25% upon their 25th birthday. Without a prenup, I would forfeit my access to the trust's assets, and all my wealth would go to charity. Despite my newfound wealth, my life didn't change. The allowance from the trust more than paid for my living. Since I didn't go public with my win and my lifestyle didn't change, no one realized my fortune. I met Catherine while volunteering at a charity that brought sporting opportunities to underprivileged children. She was beautiful, her 5'8" height complemented my 6'1". She worked with the younger children in football, while I worked with the at-risk boys in rugby, giving them an avenue to work out their anger. She was a recent graduate struggling to find a job and volunteering to boost her CV. We had been flirting casually for a few weeks. One afternoon, we both had particularly tough sessions with our kids, so I invited her to the local pub for a drink to decompress. I guess it was inevitable. The weeks of flirting, the stress of the children and alcohol, created a perfect storm. It didn't take much, but we couldn't keep our hands off each other. We spent the night in my modest flat, having sex. I don't remember that night well, but it was utterly unrestrained and limitless in possibilities, and very little in the way of precautions. We decided it was a meaningless night fueled by alcohol, and agreed to move on. That all changed when she came to me 8 weeks later and told me she was pregnant. I can't say I wanted to be a father at that point, but something clicked, and I was over the moon. I promised to support her through everything. Over her pregnancy, we got close, and our one-night stand turned into a relationship. I moved her in with me when she was 6 months pregnant, and by the time our boy, Craig, was 6 months old, I was head over heels in love and proposed. She said yes, and all was fine until my lawyers reminded me about the prenup clause in the trust. I explained the trust and its clauses in detail, and Catherine didn't care. She had fallen in love with me without knowing I had access to wealth, and was happy enough with our position. Our little girl Miranda followed 3 years later, and we had our perfect family. By this point, the trust had bought a house for us to live in. We were happy. I had spoken to the trust lawyers, and they increased my allowance to ensure our kids went to an elite private school. Catherine started asking me to take more money from the trust. We needed to help her parents, who weren't getting any younger, so the trust bought them a house. Then, her sister Nancy's children deserved the same education our kids did, since they wouldn't get the same privilege later in life. I didn't mind. All of her family had been great with me, and after how cheap mine was, it felt natural to help them. The problem was Catherine also wanted to keep up with all the other parents at school. We argued about it. I acknowledged that we could afford it, but it wasn't who we were. If I had to choose between wealth and giving our kids a down-to-earth upbringing, I would choose the down-to-earth upbringing daily. Catherine hated that idea. She said that since we had the money, it was our duty as parents to ensure our children got every advantage we could provide. I wasn't totally against her thinking, but when she started buying the kids places and events, I got angry, and our fights turned nasty. Catherine resented that I didn't embrace the wealth and restrictions imposed by the trust. Our sex life basically turned into hay ducking. We'd argue, I'd threaten to walk away, and she would suddenly turn submissive, and we'd duck away our disagreements. That changed when Miranda turned 12. We discussed divorce by then. I was all for it. Catherine fought me, saying it would hurt the kids. She thought it would be better to stay together and give the kids a nuclear family. I didn't naturally agree. Having grown up in a house where my parents hated each other, I thought it was better to divorce on decent terms and lovingly co-parent our children. In my experience, it was better than parents who always fought, barely disguising their hatred for each other. She won me over by promising me counseling, saying my parents had never tried it. I should have seen the signs. My parents made a sport out of affairs. I had lost her before the first counseling session. When she first started cheating, I had fallen for her lies. Convinced that my warnings about how I would react would keep her in line, I ignored the extra drink with the girls to get a break, the yoga session that ran late, and she had to drive friends home. Good excuses as isolated incidents, but not in the long term. After we started counseling, we go to a cafe together and discuss the session and what we needed to work on as a pair and individually. All too soon, she opted out of our time, claiming that she needed to decompress on her own. In the beginning, I accepted it, but then 30 minutes became an hour, and then an hour became 2. And it became so obvious to me not just what she was doing, but how long it had been happening. It took me a week to find a pie firm I liked. Being based in England, I knew the most my pie could get me was pictures of what she was doing in public when she wasn't with me, but I wanted a start. It took less than a week. She wasn't just cheating, she was working to steal my wealth. Her affair partner, Keith, was the account manager for the trust accountants, and my pie found out they were siphoning money. Worse than that, everyone knew her parents, her sister, our niece and nephew, and our kids. My heart was broken, but I kept a straight face. I had learned to hide pain when my parents started playing their games. I kept the pie on for a month. He recorded meetings and took pictures of my entire family together with the custard. In secret, I spoke to the trust's lawyers. They told me that I needed to get some legally admissible evidence of the affair. An associate of one of the Liechtenstein lawyers came up with the plan to screw everyone over. Under British law, prenups aren't legally enforceable. Judges are allowed to give them weight, but they're not enforceable. First, the 5 law firms that acted as trustees had a vote, and then my British lawyer's rights as a trustee were removed. Now, the trust was exclusively controlled outside of Britain. Then, all of the assets' ownership was moved outside of Britain. Now, my British lawyers had no vote in the trust, but they could represent me in the divorce without a conflict of interest. Now, for the easiest detail. Our home security contract was on the verge of renewal, as the house's owners, the trust, requested that security cameras be placed in every room except the bathrooms and children's bedrooms. Given the privacy concerns, Catherine and I needed to sign the new contract as tenants. Catherine did it without reading it because she thought it extended our existing security. The day the cameras were installed, I faked a trip to Botswana to visit one of the charities the trust supported. In reality, I was in a 5-star hotel just outside of town. It was better than I could have imagined. Within a day, they were in my house, and on camera, Keith admitted how much fun it was to rent a room to duck her and charge the trust for his time. He also admitted to other crimes like charging an extra 0.5% for jobs that went into a secret account for when the divorce happened. I watched him buy my kids with my money, promising them everything I told them to work for. It only took a weekend before we had a criminal case. I would have been happy to do nothing all weekend, but something happened on Sunday that pushed me too far. My entire wife's family was at my house for a family dinner. Duckface was working my barbecue, and everyone was talking like it was a regular thing. My son hurt me the most. I can't believe I have to pretend he's my dad until I'm an adult. He thinks he is so much better than everyone with his stories of growing up in Botswana. Who cares? That was then, this is now. The world rewards the rich. Why do I go to the same country as my friends, but sleep in a tent while they have a suite? Keith the Duckface replied, "Don't worry, Craig. By the time your mum and I are done with him, we'll go to Botswana, just to watch him serve us." I had enough and decided to interrupt their meal. They weren't happy. "Hey, everyone, don't look so surprised to see me. I'm not staying. Catherine, I'm divorcing you for adultery. Mum, Dad, a man from the trust, is coming round on Monday. You can't refuse because this is 24 hours notice. He's going to take pictures of the property and give you a 3-month eviction notice. Your emergency credit cards have been cancelled. Fee. The trust will charge you for any unreasonable damage. Nancy, I'm not so much of a custard to deny your kids an education, so they're safe. But all the extras you added to my bill are gone. I paused before turning towards the biggest traders. Craig, Miranda, my darling children. You're both old enough to know the difference between right and wrong. You made your choices, don't worry about a custody fight. You've chosen your mum, so good for you. Legally, I can't disown you. So I will still look after you. I will pay what I am legally required to until you're 18, then you're on your own. I will pay your uni fees because I don't like the idea of you starting your life in debt. But your living expenses are up to you. And you, Catherine, you remember the prenup you signed. The one where you forfeited every right to the trust if you cheated. I bet now I can prove you've defrauded me. I won't even have to give you that. The prenup is in effect from now on. Please fight it, I need something good in my life. After my speech, I gave a signal, and 4 policemen came out of the shadows to arrest Keith and Catherine. I was walking away when I heard my daughter squeal, "Daddy." I stopped in my tracks. If she needed me, I would always be there for her. "Yes, love, what do you need?" I answered. I was thankful I had 2 of my lawyer's assistants with me filming to ensure I didn't break any laws. I watched my soon-to-be ex-wife and son look at me with absolute hatred, while my daughter looked at me with pleading eyes. My in-laws were holding her, and wouldn't let her come near me. "Princess, I'll always be your daddy. I promise you will get a chance to tell me your side of the story. Remember, I have lots of evidence, so if you lie or try to trick me, I'll move on." Lots of things happened over the next few weeks. Keith's lawyer tried to argue that my evidence of him admitting to stealing my money was inadmissible because he was in a private residence. That failed on 2 counts. One, being invited into a private residence didn't permit you to commit a crime. The other was that his host, who, in this case is Catherine, had signed a contract allowing cameras in private areas, so he couldn't use his right to privacy as an excuse. It was Catherine's responsibility to tell him that he was being filmed, not mine. Catherine's lawyer tried a third-party objection to remove the film, but ignorance of what you are signing isn't a legal defense, especially when you have it on camera that no attempt was made to read the contract. My son was unapologetic and blamed me for holding him back by not using my wealth to give him a head start. The divorce was pretty easy. Catherine had signed contracts approving the cameras that provided evidence of her betrayal. They became evidence. She wanted 50% of my assets, but I had none. Liechtenstein and Malta are notoriously opaque about assets held in their jurisdictions. All they would admit to was a trust with a British beneficiary. Botswana only just about admitted I was an employee of the holding company. Based on Miranda's age, I was forced to give her 50% of my salary for 5 years. The trust provided a check for the full amount. Miranda, my little girl, came back to me and told me what happened. Catherine was tired of living in everyday life when we had money for more. She bribed and recruited Craig first, knowing Miranda would pick me. Miranda didn't want to go against her mom and brother and followed suit. Shortly after the divorce, Craig sued me. Not for money, he wanted me to give up my parental rights. He was 17, so I took it seriously. He was old enough to make decisions. We had one mediation session. I asked him why the lawsuit when he would be 18 soon and could ignore me as he wished. "You ruined my mum, my grandparents, and the person I wanted to call dad. You don't deserve to be my father," he told me. My son was truly lost to me. I signed the papers and gave him his freedom. That was only the start. Not even 2 weeks later, I received another lawsuit from him demanding he receive 25% of the trust's benefit. I wanted to ignore it since he had no case, but my lawyers advised me to deal with it head-on. It would cost us both money to ignore it. So, I agreed to one settlement meeting. At the meeting, I saw my son, ex-wife, and their lawyer take their seats across from me. I had a junior lawyer next to me. I didn't need my actual lawyer. This meeting wouldn't last long. I opened. "Craig, what are we doing here? A month ago, you were suing me to remove my parental rights, and now you're suing me for money." My son gave me a victorious grin. "Mom told me your trust says that when your children become independent, we inherit a share of your trust. I asked you to remove your parental rights to become independent. Now I get my share." My lawyer intervened. "Unless you're emancipated from your mother, you're still a minor and therefore not independent. If you're wasting our time, I can walk out now and make a complaint against your lawyer for making a false suit." My son gave us another smug grin. "Is that all you got, old man? Mom emancipated me the day after you signed away your rights. I'm an adult, and now I want my money." My lawyer looked at his opposite number. "Have you actually read the trust document your client is claiming? This is just a settlement meeting. We'll get the document in discovery." "Make us an offer," my son's lawyer said, completely unaware of how out of his depth he was. My lawyer took out a copy of the trust. There will be no settlement. Your client is entitled to nothing. Craig and his lawyer started protesting, but my lawyer was patient. What do you mean I'm entitled to nothing? Craig asked harshly. The trust states that all legal children of the principal beneficiary will receive a share of no more than 25% of the trust upon the age of 25. You sued your father to remove his parental rights, thus making you no longer his legal child. You have no right to any share of the trust. Junior was doing good, so I decided to let him keep going while I watched my former wife and son's faces get angrier. Their lawyer tried to speak, but Craig silenced him. Fine, Craig said, how about you make me an offer? And I won't tell the world what a stingy deadbeat he is. You seem to have forgotten these sessions are recorded. You have just threatened to extort my client, or else you will falsely defame him. You also did it in front of your lawyer, who can no longer claim privilege since there are witnesses. If you try, you will not only be paying my client for a long time, but you will be responsible for his bills to my firm. I enjoyed the banter, but I was tired, so I put a stop to it. Catherine, Craig, you have clearly made your choices in life, and I'm not part of them. I will pay your legal fees and give you $50,000 apiece to leave me alone. I only have 2 requests. 1. Go far away from here, and don't return without a heartfelt apology, and a desire to make up for all the hurt you have caused. 2. Miranda stays with me. Unlike you two, she can be saved. Maybe not by me, but I will pay for her to go to therapy and work out who she is without any of us. It's that, or we fight in court, and the truth about you becomes public. Epilogue. I have no idea where my ex-wife and son are. Her lover is in prison for fraud, theft and an assortment of financial crimes. Her parents left town after the embarrassment of being exposed for supporting their daughter's affair. Surprisingly, her sister Nancy stayed and is still part of our lives. I was never going to cut her off. I love her 2 kids. I could never punish children for the crimes of adults. It turns out Catherine used that fact to convince Nancy to keep her secret. I can respect her for lying to me and protecting her children. It does help that she is a monster in bed, with a determination to tell me I married the wrong sister. I thought she was trying to take Catherine's place. When I told her I would never marry again, she breathed a sigh of relief. She told me how relieved she was I didn't want to marry her. Apparently, wives don't make good slots, and she'd rather be my slot than a wife. I called bullshit, but 3 years later, she's still winning. I love my kids, but it's hard. I don't think Craig is ever coming back. I've forgiven Miranda. She's doing great in school. She might be a little too honest with me now after what happened. But we're working in the same direction. She knows what I did to her mom and brother and has forgiven me. She actually told me it's easier without them forcing her to follow their rules. She keeps asking me when I am going to ask Aunt Nancy to move in, so she has a female role model. Nancy's daughter had asked me to take her to a daddy-daughter dance soon. I think the 3 ladies in my life have made a decision and are just waiting for me to catch up to them. Oh well, it could be worse. That's it for today, friends. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Please don't forget to drop a like and comment before you leave. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification button so you don't miss any of my future videos. Goodbye for now and I'll see you next time.